Next up, I want to welcome up for our partner presentation, Dr. Ben Gursansky, who joined Telstra in January 2019. Before that, held a number of senior roles within the ag sector and government. This included working with the Australian dairy processor Murray Goulburn Cooperative Limited, the South Australian Farmers Federation Grains Council, Australia Pork Limited, and in management consultancy. Ben was also an advisor of the former Federal Minister for Regional Development, the Honourable Simon Crean. Ben holds a Bachelor of Applied Science with honours from the University of Adelaide, a Doctor of Philosophy from the Uni of New England, and a Master of Business Administration from the Melbourne Business School. Please make him welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone. First of all, I'd just like to say it's always nice to follow Tony because I don't have to touch the mic, so that's set to the right height for me. But also, I'd just like to, first of all, acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we meet on, the Ngunnawal people, and also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land I come from, which is the Wurundjeri people of the Eora Nation in Victoria. Thanks, Dan, for the introduction, but also thanks, Fiona and Tony, as well. I think wonderful leadership that you both show, but also the board and your teams, particularly around the 2030 roadmap. I think it's been a great vision for you, and I think one of the challenges we often have is remaining committed to and focused on that vision, and often there's always distractions that can sway us off there, but I think your steadfastness and focus on that has been, I admire, and I think it's been fantastic. Your leadership continues to drive that vision forward because that's how we'll achieve the goal. It's great to be back at the Leaders Summit, and as Dan mentioned, the last one was in 2019, and we had this pesky virus that seemed to go around that sort of impacted us over the last couple of years, and from Victoria I can particularly relate to how pesky it was. But today what I'd like to briefly talk to you about is the importance of partnerships and policy, and how both a foundation to encouraging leadership, innovation, investment in ag, and I think hopefully it might also demonstrate a little bit of the answer behind the question to Tony, just around how partners can work in on some of the goals, and I think we can maybe show how Telstra sees that working for ourselves from our perspective. So, as Fiona alluded to, we've been very pleased to be able to work closely with farming groups, not only the NFF, but across Australia, the state farming groups as well, and we do that across every state and territory. And we're especially proud of the long-standing and strategic collaboration we have with the NFF. And the vision that has been set out in the roadmap around $100 billion for 2030 is one that we share with this sector. And we share the same approach to putting the roadmap strategies into action at every level, and we've done that from discussions at national policy through to practices on farm. And as Fiona mentioned, we've been there from the start. We were part of the Talking 2030 road trip, from the initial regional consultations through to how our new partnership that we signed at the beginning of the year has been structured with a real focus around the leadership and innovation components of the roadmap. And so we're proud to be working to share the merits of that. One of the things I want to just pause is I think sometimes people might wonder, why does Telstra want to partner with organisations like NFF and agriculture? And I think it goes to fundamentally to Telstra's commitment to regional Australia. We know regional Australia is very diverse, there's a lot of opportunities in regional Australia, but it also, agriculture is a very strong part of that. And I think a successful agriculture sector will mean a successful regional Australia. And for us, that's very important as a company. It goes to really the DNA of the company, but also I think it's important for agriculture industry and any industry to have champions that are not necessarily actively part of being recognised as an agriculture business, but in this instance, Telstra being able to bring its voice and its support to this vision, I think can really help, and it works the other way as well for us, and I'll touch on how that can support us and how we can continue to deliver connectivity into the regions. The roadmap is clear in relation to digital technology will not only support innovation and productivity on farm, but also to support the industry's environmental credentials, and it also boosts its reputation both here in Australia and abroad. So finding out what farmers need in order to seize the opportunity created by digital technology is very much what Talking 2030 and Telstra's overall approach to service is about. And listening to our customers wherever they are is something we've always done. It's why we continue to improve connectivity, reducing black spots on farms, improving farm safety and resolving network congestion where it exists. But creating the digital future necessary to make the 2030 goal of a reality requires more than managing the present. It requires fertile ground where fresh ideas and forward thinking can thrive. And that's why it's important that we talk about getting policy right. Now, at a national level, we need policies that focus on the right incentives being put in place to deliver and disseminate technology across all industries, but particularly across agriculture. And as you know, Telstra has been advocating for national telecommunications policy reform. The most recent findings from the Regional Telecommunications Review were a welcome addition to this policy discussion, and we're doing our bit to address the recommendations it put forward. But if we want to realise our 2030 goals and unlock the benefits that we'll bring, there are some big policy approaches that we need to adopt. For farmers to take full advantage of the digital future, we need to do more than provide the right technology. We need to write the right mix of technologies. It's not going to be one single technology that solves the connectivity challenge. It's going to be multiple. After all, the future isn't just about that. It isn't 5G versus NBN or LEOsats replacing geosats or edge computing replacing cloud. If you don't understand what I've just said, my colleague Channa is going to be speaking a little bit more on the technology roadmap, and we'll talk a little bit about some of that emerging technology. But while we look to the future and the demand for more low latency bandwidth, we need all of these technologies and we need them all to advance. But a technology agnostic approach will ensure choice is not directed by legislation or regulation, but rather by the evolving customer needs. So making sure we have the right technologies and the feasibility of the solutions. So one of the greatest barriers that we've identified achieving the current requirement is the fact that we still have this requirement attached to the old copper network to deliver telephone services, in most cases outside the NBN fixed line footprint. This is a major impact. This is a big part for regional telecommunications. The copper network has served us well over many decades, but like a good old tractor, it is one that has probably done too many harvests and needs to be replaced. Parts are hard to come by and increasingly hard to source. So we really do need to replace it with modern alternatives, but to be able to achieve that, we need to see some changes in federal policies, particularly around the modernisation of the universal service obligation. And that's something we've been arguing for a long time, and we think we'll start to see some progress there. But we're also important to note that technology agnostic approach can only be achieved with an equivalent approach to who is providing the technology, so it really needs to think about it being a provider agnostic approach as well. So it should be about anyone providing those policy settings, the same regulations applying. So that's one of the reasons why Telstra, and working with NFF, we're committed to supporting regulations that will service customers and have a focus on that rather than just solely about the technology. What I'd just like to now just focus a little bit around is the need for reform doesn't just stopping there. One of the areas that Australian telecommunication policy levers we must provide is the incentives to invest in digital connectivity, and that will help deliver the connectivity that farmers need. To state the obvious, the challenge with tech investment, particularly remote areas, is Telstra can't do it all. And we do need the co-investment programs that have been delivered to continue to support the investment in areas where it is economically challenging to do so. And these co-investment programs do deliver improved connectivity for local communities and businesses. And this is where one of my themes for today, partnership in policy, comes together. And I think this also explains how we can work together with the groups like NFF, because a well-designed and delivered co-investment program is effective because there is the right policy approach matched with the right partnerships. Let me just use an example here. If you look at the previous regional connectivity programs, we're going to deliver a number of projects through that co-investment using solutions for specific regions that draw often on investments from state and federal government and also investments from Telstra in any of these projects. But an important part of the approach has been a demonstration of both the socioeconomic benefits expected from the delivery of the improved connectivity. We have to do that, we have to demonstrate in the bids. And so to support that, we need specific projects that have demonstration of that. And this is where we draw on the support of organisations like National Farmers Federation, a number of the state farming organisations, to be able to demonstrate where those socioeconomic benefits will be and be able to get successful outcomes from the funding applications, which will then ultimately lead to projects being invested in, which will deliver better connectivity. So of course, the participation in co-investment is just one part of our broader investment activity. For Telstra, over 7 years to the end of October of this year, Telstra will have invested $11 billion in our mobile network and nationally, and that's $4 billion of that being in regional mobile network. That's vastly more than any other telco, and bear in mind this figure doesn't even incorporate the annual work we do to maintain our infrastructure. So just to conclude, it's often simpler and easier for people like me just to come here and talk about the big picture and the abstract concepts. So what I wanted to do is bring it down, in my conclusion, is just to bring it down to a very specific example. And I wanted to look at a real example of what's possible when the power, in this case digital connectivity, is put in the hands of the farmer. One of the big pluses about listening to our customers is we're constantly shown what they can do with the right tools. The example I wanted to talk about was a farmer called Brad Egan, who's a broadacre crop farmer from Scadden in Western Australia. Brad is achieving a lot through digitisation in his family farm, and he actually just earned the award for excellence in innovation, which is an award Telstra has sponsored through the Condinin Farmer of the Year award since 2018. Brad has a passion for precision agriculture and uses a range of technological practices, data analysis tools and science to optimise on-farm efficiencies, including an array of data analysis tools to help characterise soils, understand production constraints and gain insights into the farm's overall financial position. When I spoke with Brad, he proudly claimed himself to be a data nerd. So understanding how data and digitised farm records is valuable right across the business, from identifying, sorry, I've already covered that off. Our commitment to partnerships and policy reform is for going ahead farmers like Brad and his family and the many thousands like them around Australia. At Telstra, we're in a great position to back the ingenuity of farmers, and through powerful partnerships like we have with the NFF and the right policy approach supported by government, we're determined to make it happen.
Thanks very much, Ben. Dr. Ben Gursansky, Head of Rural and Regional at Telstra, and really powerfully there touching on the importance of partnership and working together and what is the art of the possible when that happens. I think what you're talking about of being champions and allies is so crucial, and I saw lots of nods in the crowd as you were saying that. So thanks very much for that presentation. We'll be hearing from you again at the end of the day with observations.